Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the channel. And today I'm going to go my review of Starrcade 1988. Starting off the evening, we'll go to our first match of the night. It is a tag team matchup. It is the Fantastics versus Kevin Sullivan and Dr. Death Steve Williams for the U.S. Tag Team Championships. Number one, I thought this was a good opening matchup for Starrcade 88. Back and forth matchup between both teams with Kevin Sullivan and Dr. Death Steve Williams keeping the pace of the match. Williams hits a press slam on Bobby Fulton. Fantastics then hit a double dropkick on Steve Williams. Fulton and Sullivan both exchange in the middle of the ring. Tommy Rogers then goes for a top rope maneuver but is met with knees. Williams then hits a leg drop on Tommy Rogers. Williams and Sullivan were keeping control of the match at this point, but Fulton goes to hit a Lou Thesz press, but Williams sends him into the ropes head first, pins for the 3, and your winners of the match, and at that time, new United States Tag Team Champions are Dr. Death Steve Williams and Kevin Sullivan. Hats off to Dr. Death Steve Williams and Kevin Sullivan for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the original Midnight Express versus the Midnight Express. Number one, I thought it was a good matchup. Back and forth matchup between both teams with the Midnight Express keeping the pace of the match. Jim Cornette then hits Dennis Condrey with a tennis racket. Eaton and Lane were controlling the matchup at this point. Bobby Eaton then hits an elbow drop at the top rope on Dennis Condrey. Eaton then hits a net breaker on Condrey as well. Condrey then gets up, hits a power slam on Bobby Eaton. Eaton then goes to hit Condrey, but takes out the ref. Paulie dangerously then attacks Stan Lane. Jim Cornette then attacks Paulie dangerously. Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane then hit the finish, pin for the 3, and your winners of the match are Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane. Hats off to the Midnight Express for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is a tag team matchup. It is JYD, Junkyard Dog, and Ivan Koloff versus the Russian Assassins. I thought it was an okay matchup. Back and forth matchup between both teams with JYD and Ivan Koloff keeping the pace of the match. But the Russian Assassins are putting something... One of the Russian Assassins were putting something in their mask. And then one of the Russian Assassins ended up hitting a headbutt on Ivan Koloff. Pin for the 3. And your winners of the match are the Russian Assassins. Hats off to the Russian Assassins for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Mike Rotunda versus Rick Steiner for the NWA Television Championship. First thing I'll say about this matchup is that Kevin Sullivan was actually locked in a cage throughout the whole duration of this match. The match itself was a really good matchup. Back and forth matchup between both Rotunda and Rick Steiner. Mike Rotunda and Rick Steiner were exchanging in the middle of the ring. Rick Steiner was keeping the pace of the match. Rick then hits a devastating clothesline on Mike Rotunda. Rick then hits a crossbody on Mike Rotunda as well. Mike then gets up, hits an elbow drop on Rick Steiner. Dr. Death Steve Williams is here. Rick then hits a power slam on Mike Rotunda. Steve Williams then rings the bell. Then the match restarts, but Rick ultimately hits the finish on Mike Rotunda, pinning him for the 3, and your winner of the match. And at that time, the new NWA Television Champion is Rick Steiner. Hats off to Rick Steiner for getting the win in this matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Barry Windham versus Bam Bam Bigelow for the United States Heavyweight Championship. Number one, I thought it was a really good matchup. Back and forth matchup between both Barry Windham and Bam Bam Bigelow, with Bigelow keeping the pace of the match. Windham then hits a back suplex on Bigelow, but Bigelow hits a press slam on Windham. Windham then throws Bigelow into the ring post. Referee counts Bigelow out. And your winner of the match due to count out, and still at that time, United States Heavyweight Champion is Barry Windham. Hats off to Barry Windham for getting the win, and at that time retaining the United States Heavyweight Championship. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is Dusty Rhodes and Sting versus the Road Warriors for the NWA Tag Team Championships. Number one, I thought this was a really good matchup. Back and forth match between both teams. Sting ends up hitting a dropkick on Animal. Dusty and Sting were keeping the pace of the match. Animal, though, hits a press slam on Sting. Sting then gets up, hits a crossbody on Animal off the top rope. Sting then hits a Stinger Splash on Animal as well in the corner. Sting then hits a crossbody on Animal. And then Sting then goes to cover, but Paul Ellering gets involved, stops the ref for the count. And your winners of the match by disqualification are Dusty Rhodes and Sting. Hats off to Dusty Rhodes and Sting for getting the win in that matchup. Moving on from that, we go into our next match of the night. It is the main event. It is Ric Flair versus Lex Luger for the NWA Heavyweight Championship. Number one, I thought it was a really great matchup. Back and forth matchup between both Flair and Luger, with Luger keeping the pace of the match. Lex then applies a torture rack on Ric Flair, but Lex Luger leg gives out. Flair ends up pinning Lex Luger using the ropes. Referee didn't see it. Pins Lex Luger for the 3, and your winner of the match, and at that time still NWA World Heavyweight Champion, is Ric Flair. Couple of things I'm going to say about Starrcade 1988 before I get out of here, man. Number one, this was a really solid event. A couple of matches on here that I really did enjoy. Obviously, the main event between Ric Flair and Lex Luger for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. The other match I liked as well was a United States Heavyweight Championship matchup between Barry Windham and Bam Bam Bigelow. I've stated this multiple times in the past, man. Bigelow was severely underrated throughout his career. I mean, he was one of those big guys that can move like a light heavyweight. And not a lot of guys his size, I think he was like 390, 400 pounds, can, really have that kind of movement in the ring for a man that size, that stature. So the Barry Windham Bigelow match was absolutely fantastic. The Dusty Rhodes Sting match versus Road Warriors for the NWA Tag Team Championships was also great. But at the same time, too, I kind of always wanted to see Dusty Rhodes and Sting become the NWA Tag Team Champions. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. They did win the match, but it was because of disqualification. But if I had to give Starrcade 1988 a rating from 1 out of 10, I'm going to give it a solid 7 at best, man. It's not the best Starrcade, but it definitely wasn't the worst Starrcade. But I think a 7 is probably the best rating I can give Starrcade 1988. But this is my review of Starrcade 1988. I hope you guys are out there staying safe. Be careful, and remember, stay classic. Peace.